Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Batra. We are up to Perek Yud, Mishnah Aleph. Today's Mishnah should be Le'elui Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Ranbayev Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov Chana bad Miriam Sason ben Rai Yoshua ben Shifra Menuchatam began Eden Amen and Le'avdil ben Chaim Lechaim v'derefua shenemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa בתוך שאר חולי ישראל עד החלמה מרב בנימין אור ציון חי בן דבורה. The final chapter of the Masechet deals with the laws of documents. The first Mishnah identifies two ways that a document can be written. Get pashut edav mitocho. A simple, ordinary document has its witnesses signed on its front, meaning at the end of the document in the normal manner. Kushar edav me'achorav. But a tied document has its witnesses signed on its back. Now, a tied document is a special type of document that the sages originally designed to be used by Kohanim who are divorcing their wives. Since Kohanim may not remarry their divorced wives, the sages wished to avoid the possibility that a Kohen would divorce his wife in a fit of anger and then be unable to marry her. A tied document is more difficult to prepare, and therefore the Kohen would have to wait until it was ready, during which time his anger would hopefully cool. Although tied documents were originally designed for bills of divorce, the sages did not distinguish between documents and ruled that all documents prepared this way are valid, so that scribes would be familiar with them. Now, although the Mishnah speaks of a get, which generally refers to a bill of divorce, the word get in this Mishnah simply means document. By the time of the Rishonim, tied documents were no longer used. But again, the Mishnah says a tied document has its witnesses signed on its back. Now, to prepare a tied document, a scribe writes the first line of the document, then leaves a blank line, folds the written line over the blank line, and sews the fold closed. He then writes a second line, leaves another blank line, folds the written line over the blank line, and sews that fold closed. And this process is repeated 3 or more times, so the top of the document resembles a fan. The remainder of the document's text is written in the normal way on the front of the document, but the witnesses sign on the back of the document, with one witness signing on the back of each fold. The sages could have had the witnesses sign a tied document on its front in the usual way, but they wished to make the tied document as different as possible from an ordinary document, so it would be more complicated and take longer to prepare. Pashut shekatvu edav me'achorav. If a simple document has its witnesses signed on its reverse in the way that witnesses usually sign a tied document, kushar shekatvu edav mitocho, or a tied document has its witnesses signed on its front, shnei psulim, they are both invalid because they were not written according to the rules of the sages. If the document is a bill of divorce, the woman to whom it is given is not divorced, and if it is a loan document, it cannot be used to collect a loan from properties that were sold by the borrower. Now, Tana disagrees with part of this last ruling. Rabbi Hanina ben Gamliel Omer, Rabbi Chana ben Gamliel says, Mikushar shekatvu edav mitocho kasher. A tied document with its witnesses signed on its front is valid, because the scribe can make it into a simple document by opening its folds. Although there will be blank spaces between the first few lines of the document where the document was originally folded down, this does not matter because there is often blank space between the lines of documents. Inexperienced scribes would often leave such spaces between lines, and Rabbi Chana ben Gamliel is not concerned that the holder of the document will add writing in the spaces, because text inserted into the middle of a document in this way is easily recognized as having been forged. The Tanna Kama, however, holds that such a document is invalid because it is written neither like a simple document nor like a tied document. Even according to Rabbi Chana ben Gamliel, a simple document that has its witnesses signed on the reverse is invalid because it cannot be made into a tied document. And the Rav tells us, well, we're going to continue with the Mishnah. Yes, we're going to continue with the Mishnah. If someone asks a scribe to prepare a simple document for him, and the scribe prepares a tied document instead, or if he asks the scribe to prepare a tied document, and the scribe prepares a simple document instead, the document is generally invalid because it was not prepared in the way the person asked for it to be prepared. A Tana, however, notes that this is not always true. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, Hakol kiminag medina, everything follows the custom of the community. Therefore, if the custom in a certain place is to use either type of document, and the person asks for one type but the scribe prepared the other type, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel holds that the document is valid because the person does not really care which way the document is prepared, since both types are used there, and his instruction to prepare it one way was only a suggestion. The Tana Kama, however, holds that a person wants the scribe to prepare his document in the way that he requested, and therefore if the scribe wrote the other type of document, it is invalid even if both types of documents are used in the community. The Tana Kama and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel both agree that if the custom in a community is to use only one type of document, and the scribe did not obey his instructions to prepare that type of document, but instead prepared the other type, it is invalid. And the Rav does follow the opinion of the halacha. The Rav says that the halacha does follow the opinion of the Tana Kama. And that is then of Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Bet lists more differences between simple and tied documents. Get pashut edav b'shnayim. A simple document must be signed by 2 witnesses. Kushar b'shlosha, and a tied document must be signed by 3 witnesses. Although the Torah does not require more than 2 witnesses to offer testimony on any matter, the Torah requires 2 witnesses for testimony about monetary matters, as well as matters of marriage and divorce. Therefore, the vast majority of documents require 2 witnesses. The sages required that there must be a 3rd witness on a tied document. A tied document must have 1 witness for each fold that the scribe makes when he is preparing it. This can be more than 3, but the minimum is 3 folds and 3 witnesses. Now, a tied document requires at least 3 witnesses because the sages wish to make it as difficult and time-consuming as possible to prepare. The Mishnah now discusses what the law is if a document does not have the proper number of witnesses. Pashut shekatuv bo ed echad, if there is a simple document that has only 1 witness signed on it, kushar shekatuv bo shnei edim, or a tied document that has 2 witnesses signed on it, shneim psulim, they are both invalid. A simple document without 2 witnesses is invalid by Torah law because 2 witnesses are required for most testimony. Now this ruling is obvious. It's only included here to shed light on the ruling that follows. And a tied document without 3 witnesses is invalid, despite the fact that there are still 2 witnesses offering testimony, because it was not prepared according to the decree of the sages. By Torah law, this document should be valid because it has 2 valid witnesses, but the sages, who required 3 witnesses for a tied document, decreed that even if 1 witness is missing, the document is completely invalid, just as if it had only 1 witness. And the Mishnah teaches that a simple document with 1 witness is invalid, even though it's obvious, only to emphasize that a tied document with 2 witnesses is just as invalid as a document with 1 witness, which is biblically invalid. Now the Mishnah turns to discuss documents in general and teaches what is done when 2 statements written in a document seem to contradict each other. Katuv bo zuzin me'ad inun sil'in esrin. If the words 100 zuzim, which amounts to 20 slaim, were written in a document, for example, in a loan document, eno el esrin, the document holder can claim only 20 slaim, which equal only 80 zuz, a standard settlers with 4 zuz. Although the document also identified the sum as 100 zuz, which would normally equal 25 slaim, we interpret these words as referring to 100 zuzim of poor quality, which are worth only 20 slaim. Since the document holder cannot prove that he is owed more than this amount, he cannot use the document to collect more than this. In this case, there is no evidence that the 2 sums in the document contradict each other. If they do, a different set of rules would apply, for we can interpret the second term to be explaining the first. 100 inferior zuzim that are worth only 20 slaim. And although normally the term 100 zuzim means 100 standard zuzim, which are worth 25 slaim, the document holder has the lower hand, because meaning the weaker position, because the rule is that the burden of proof lies upon the one who wishes to take something away from his fellow. Zuzin me'ad inun tlatin sil'in. For the same reason, if the words 100 zuzim, which amount to 30 slaim, were written in the document, eno el maneh, the document holder can claim only 100 zuz and not 30 standard slaim, which would equal 120 zuz, because we interpret the document as referring to 30 slaim of poor quality, which are worth only 100 zuz in total. Again, since the document holder cannot prove that he is owed more than this, he cannot collect the larger amount. The Mishnah teaches both of these cases to show that the document holder has the lower hand whenever there is a way to explain both sums as referring to a lesser amount, and it does not matter whether the term that has to be interpreted in a non-standard manner is the first sum mentioned or the second one. The Mishnah now teaches the law when a word in the document was erased. Kisav zuzin di'inun v'nimchak. If the document says silver zuzim in the amount of, and the next word is erased, and pachot mishtayim, the missing amount cannot be less than 2, because the word zuzim, which is plural, shows that the amount that had been written in the document was at least 2. Therefore, the document holder can collect 2 zuz, but no more. The document holder cannot collect more than 2 zuz, because the burden of proof is on him to prove that the number erased in the document was larger than 2. Kisav sid'in di'inun v'nimchak. Similarly, if the document says silver slaim in the amount of, and the next word is erased, and pachot mishnayim, the missing number cannot be less than 2, because the plural word slaim surely referred to at least 2 slaim. Dalkonot dinun v'nimchak. And if the document says dalkonot, a dalkon is a gold coin. If the document says dalkonot in the amount of, and the next word was erased, and pachot mishtayim, the missing number cannot be less than 2, and the document holder can claim only 2 slaim or dalkonot. The Mishnah teaches this law with respect to different coins to show that the law applies regardless of the value of the coins involved. Now, the Mishnah discussed documents with language that seemed to be contradictory, but which could be explained as not being contradictory. Now the Mishnah teaches what to do when 2 amounts written in a document clearly contradict each other. Katuv bo milmala maneh milmata matayim. If the amount of a maneh, 100 zuz, is written earlier in a document, but later in the document, when the main information in the document is repeated, the amount is written as 200 zuz. Milmala matayim or milmata maneh, or in the opposite case, where earlier in the document the amount is written as 200 zuz, and later in the document review the amount is written as maneh, 100 zuz. Hakol olech achar tachton. Everything follows after the amount as it is written at the bottom, because we assume that the scribe originally made a mistake and then corrected his mistake later in the document. Now, although the Mishnah taught earlier that the document holder has the lower hand, here we do not say that the document holder can collect only the smaller of the 2 sums, because in these cases there is clearly a contradiction in the document that cannot be explained away, and the most likely reason for this is that the scribe corrected an earlier mistake. In some communities, there was a custom to review the sums in the document a 3rd time in the last line of the document. The Mishnah's ruled that we follow the bottom sentence does not apply to this 3rd repetition. For the law is that we do not learn anything from the final line of a document. What the Gemara says, En lemedin mishita acharona. The Mishnah asks, Im ken lama chotvin et ha'elyon? If so, why do we write the earlier part of the document at all? Meaning, what is the value of the earlier part of the document if the critical parts are always repeated and we always follow what is written in the later part if the 2 do not match? The Mishnah explains that there is a case where the earlier part of the document is followed. Because if one letter of a name or amount in the document is erased in the bottom of the document, we learn from the top of the document what the missing letter was. Where there is no clear contradiction, the top of the document can tell us what letter was erased from the bottom of the document. If more than one letter is erased from the bottom, however, the information cannot be taken from the top of the document, because 2 letters can sometimes be the majority of a word, and we may not derive more than half of a missing word from the top of a document. And that is an Abotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.